Every single fall, I see the same thing happening over and over again. Students sit in coffee shops and bedrooms, hunched over their laptops and just pouring hours into their essay. They type, delete, retype, and finally hit submit, convinced they nailed it just this last time. In their minds, they picture an admissions officer smiling as they read it, but then I look at the opening line and it's the same tired sentence that I've seen hundreds of times before. We were down by 5 points in the championship, or on my trip abroad, I realized how lucky I am, or when my grandparent passed away, I understood the meaning of family. You could almost hear the admissions officer sigh, because when I look at them, I'm also kind of just being like, I've read this all before. The problem isn't that the student picked the wrong story or did something bad. The problem is that they fell into the trap of telling it the exact same way everyone else does in the first place. And here's what most people don't realize. Admissions officers aren't begging you to have some once-in-a-lifetime adventure. They don't need you to invent the next iPhone or start a nonprofit before senior year. What they actually want is to see how you think, how you notice the world, and how you sound when you stop pretending and write honestly with your voice. And that's why two students can pick the exact same topic, but one essay ends up forgettable while the other lands in the "this kid gets it" folder. The difference isn't the topic, like I said, it's about the execution. It's the voice, the perspective, and the little details that make it feel like no one else could have written it. So here's the plan. I'm gonna walk you through 6 of the worst college essay cliches, and for each one, I'll show you the lazy version that sounds like everyone else, then I'll flip it into a version that actually works. So by the end, you'll know exactly how to take a tired idea and turn it into a story that admissions officers will actually remember. Cliche number 6, the championship game. We were down by 5 points with 1 minute left. I pushed through, we won, and I learned about perseverance. On the surface, this line feels dramatic, like a play-by-play recap of a movie moment, but when you read it, it quickly blurs into the same story you've heard 100 times. It feels predictable, almost like it was lifted from the sports section of a newspaper. There's no sense of what it actually felt like to be in that moment. There's no emotion, there's no personal perspective, just a generic claim about perseverance that could have come from literally anyone. So a better version of this is, when I was benched the entire season and only played 1 minute in the final game, I realized leadership isn't always about being on the court. It's about lifting teammates from the sidelines. Do you see how this version immediately hits differently? Instead of bragging about a win, it pulls us into the frustration of waiting all season, the sting of barely being able to play in the final game, and the humility it took to still show up for your teammates despite being benched. You could literally picture the students standing there, cheering, clapping, encouraging, whatever it is. The focus isn't the trophy or the roar of the crowd. It's the quiet growth and that reflection that comes from realizing leadership sometimes means stepping back. That kind of detail and honesty makes the story that much more personal and, most importantly, believable. There's a reason some college essays make admissions officers say yes in the first 30 seconds, but no one is talking about it because it's in the hidden frameworks, the real psychology that makes top 20 applications pull emotional triggers. And I'm breaking it all down in my free private 6-day series where I'll walk you through 3 real applications for my own students who got into their dream top 20 schools like Stanford, Yale, and Princeton. You'll see why they worked and how to apply the same exact framework to yours. It's completely free, but the registration closes in 24 hours. So click the first link in the description and sign up before it's too late because, as I've said, it closes in just 24 hours. All right, now let's continue with this video. Cliche number 5, volunteering abroad. I went to Guatemala, saw how poor the children were, and it made me so grateful for what I have. At first glance, this might sound like a meaningful reflection. You picture yourself being dropped into a new place, noticing how different everything is, and coming home with a new sense of gratitude for your situation. But on the page itself, it ends up feeling really shallow and, most importantly, like very, very, very privileged. It could have been written by anyone who spent a week abroad. There are no details, there's no vivid images, no sense of who you are in the moment. It lands super flat, more like a, like a surface level diary entry than a personal one. So a better version of this would be, the kids laughed at my broken Spanish and taught me their clapping games. That moment made me realize how arrogance blinds us, but listening builds bridges. Now the scene comes alive here. You can hear the giggles as you stumble over the words, you can see their hands moving in rhythm, and you can feel your own humility rising as you realize you weren't the teacher, you were just the student. And that shift in perspective is really strong. Instead of sounding like a generic trip summary that anyone can kind of go on, it captures a specific personal moment that only that student can tell. Cliche number 4, grandparent passing away. My grandparent died and I realized how important family is. At first, obviously this is just full of emotion, right? And it's sincere because losing someone close post is really, really personal. But when you look at the words, they could easily appear in thousands of essays without changing a single detail. It doesn't let us see who your grandparents were, what your bond looked like, or how their presence shaped your life at all. Instead, it comes across as broad and generic, something that, again, anyone could write, even if the feeling behind it is most definitely real. So a better version of this would be, every time I hear the crack of a rocking chair, I'm back in my grandmother's kitchen, translating her Korean idioms into English jokes, and realizing language is the thread that ties generations. This version paints a picture you can almost step into. The details of the wooden chair groaning, you can smell the kitchen air, and you can imagine the laughter, at least the attempts for laughter as they're trying to, translate the language. But you see that it's not just about the death in itself. It's about what has preceded that, the memory, the humor, and the unique details that define your relationship. Those specific textures make the story alive and unmistakably yours. And before we move on, let me quickly speak to the parents who might be watching this. If you don't want to spend the next few months stressing about whether your student is on the right track with essays and applications, here's what I recommend. Book a discovery call using the first link in the description. It's a chance to see if working together is the right fit. If it is, awesome. We'll guide your student one-on-one throughout the entire program, making sure every single step of the process is clear and strategic. But if you're not quite ready for that just yet, that's totally fine. These YouTube videos itself are there for free for students too, and parents as well, to kind of learn through this process. Cliché number 3, immigrant struggle. My parents came to this country with nothing, and their sacrifice inspires me to work very hard. At first glance, just like all the other ones I've given before, the line feels emotional and weighty. It gestures toward hardship, sacrifice, and just the overall determination. But when you stop and think about it, you realize it's vague enough to describe hundreds, if not thousands, of different families. It doesn't take us into your living room or your kitchen table or the specific ways that sacrifice shaped your everyday life. Instead of feeling like your story, it comes across more like a bumper sticker slogan, if that makes sense. A better version would be, when I secretly filled out FAFSA forms for my parents because the instructions were in English, I realized resilience isn't just inherited, it's practiced in quiet, unseen acts. And you see how this version just land completely differently. Suddenly, we can picture the scene. We can see the paper spread out on the table, complicated directions in front of you, and your parents are just looking on while you quietly slide into the role of translator and problem solver. We can sense the weight of responsibility on your shoulders and the determination it took to handle it. And that's the difference between telling and showing. Because if you start showing, it's no longer an abstract idea about sacrifice. It's a lived moment that reveals your character in action. And through that moment that you talk about, we understand how resilience became not just something you admired, but something you carried out in your own life. Now, before we get into cliché number 2, if this is helping out, please subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. And let's go to cliché number 2, which is mission trip and community service. So a lazy one that I see all the time is building houses for the poor showed me how lucky I am. This might sound like a thoughtful reflection. You picture yourself under the sun, swinging a hammer, sweating through the day, and then pausing to think about how fortunate your own life is. But when you put on that paper and someone else is reading on it, the focus ends up squarely on you. So even if you mean it sincerely, it comes across as shallow and generic, something, again, almost anyone could say after a service trip. So a better version of this would be, halfway through mixing cement under the sun, I realized my clumsy work slowed the local builders down. The real service wasn't hammering nails, it was documenting the project to help fund their next phase. This version completely changes the perspective. Instead of centering on yourself, it shows humility, you admit your efforts weren't actually useful, and then you shift the story into something unexpected, finding another way to contribute that had real impact. You can feel the heat, the sweat. That's what makes the story honest and powerful. It's not just about doing the service in itself, but it's also about being able to listen, adapt, and add value where it counts. And finally, cliché number 1 is overcoming injury. Lazy version. I tore my ACL, couldn't play sports, but I worked hard and came back stronger. On paper, this line sounds inspiring, but the issue, almost every athlete who's ever been sidelined in their whole entire career has some written version of this. So by the 10th time an admissions officer reads this, the story loses all the power. It no longer feels personal, and it just feels like another generic tale of adversity overcome. So a better version of this would be, while injured, I became the team's unofficial statistician, tracking plays with obsessive detail. I discovered that I loved the strategy of the game more than the glory, and that led me to data science. Now you can see how this version feels completely different. Instead of the rehashing of the most generic story ever, it paints a vivid picture. You're on the sidelines with a notebook in hand, scribbling down plays, noticing patterns, and getting lost in the strategy of the game. Because this injury now becomes more than just a setback, it turns it into the gateway for a new passion that you're going to introduce in the essay. The curiosity and that unexpected twist makes the story stand out, and it's not just about bouncing back stronger, right? It's about discovering a whole new side of yourself because of it. So here's the bottom line, and it's one that students often forget. It doesn't actually matter if your essay idea feels feel small, ordinary, or even like, something admissions officers have read before. What matters is how you choose to tell the story. The execution is absolutely everything. That means slowing down to include the little details only you would notice, choosing words that sound like your natural voice instead of a stiff essay persona, and letting the reader step into your shoes to see the world the way that you do. So instead of burning energy worrying whether your idea is impressive enough, shift that energy into bringing it to life on the page. That's the part that makes an essay stand out in a stack of thousands. The cliche itself isn't the real enemy. The danger is writing it so vaguely that it could have come from anyone. And if you want to go even deeper into this topic, watch my video called The Ultimate Student Productivity Setup, and it shows you how to structure your time, energy, and focus so you're not just writing better essays, but staying on top of every part of your application without burning out. So if you haven't seen it, don't miss it, click here. But if not, if this helped you out, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.